Welcome everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. We're glad to have you with us as we journey into this intriguing tale. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, and share your thoughts in the comments section below. Now, let's dive into our story. On a cold, moonlit night, a man stumbles into a bar, his face as white as a sheet. It was an evening just like any other in Highfields, a suburb of Harare, Zimbabwe. The night was young, the air was crisp, and the streets were bustling with life. Among the crowd, a man, taken in by the allure of a beautiful woman, found himself drawn into a scenario he would never forget. Her name was Peggy, a radiant figure that stood out in the crowd. She was as enchanting as she was mysterious, a siren in the night. The man, captivated by her beauty, was enticed into accompanying her home. Little did he know the journey he was about to embark on was far from ordinary. As they navigated through the labyrinthine streets of Highfields, the man was blissfully unaware of the chilling truth. What he perceived as a cozy home was in fact a place of eternal rest. The house, as Peggy called it, was none other than a cemetery, a realm where the living and the dead intermingle. The pair spent the night together, the man completely oblivious to the macabre reality of his surroundings. It was not until the first light of dawn that the horrifying truth began to unfold. As the man awoke, he found himself not in the comfort of a bed, but atop a cold, hard grave. Chilled to the bone, the man looked around, his heart pounding in his chest. He was alone, surrounded by tombstones etched with names of the departed. His eyes, filled with terror, landed on his jacket, hanging eerily on a tombstone nearby. The name inscribed on the stone sent a shiver down his spine. It read, Peggy. As dawn broke, the man found himself lying atop a grave, his jacket hung on a tombstone bearing the name Peggy. The chilling encounter left the man in a state of shock, forever haunted by the ghostly memory of the beautiful woman named Peggy. Before she became a specter haunting the streets of Highfields, Peggy was a young, vibrant woman. A woman with dreams and aspirations. A woman with a life that sadly went down a path many wouldn't choose willingly. Peggy was a lady of the night. She was a familiar face on the dimly lit corners of Harare, Zimbabwe's bustling metropolis. Her beauty was her currency, her allure her trade. Men flocked to her, drawn by her charm, her wit, and the promise of ephemeral companionship. She was a beacon in the lonely hours of the night, a refuge for those seeking solace in the arms of a stranger. But Peggy's life was not all about the sordid exchanges under the cover of darkness. She was more than her profession. She was a woman who laughed, who cried, who loved. She was a woman who dreamed of a better future, a future away from the shadows of the night. Yet, the harsh realities of life had her ensnared, her dreams held captive by circumstances. Then came the unexpected twist in her tale, a pregnancy, an unplanned, unwanted predicament that threatened to disrupt the delicate balance of her life. Peggy was faced with a life-altering decision, a choice that no woman should ever have to make. She was caught between the proverbial rock and a hard place, her dreams of a better future and the harsh reality of her present. In her desperation, Peggy made a choice that she believed was her only way out, a choice that tragically ended her life. The attempt to terminate her pregnancy went awry, and Peggy, the vibrant woman of Highfields, was no more. Her dreams, her aspirations, her life, all snuffed out in one cruel sweep. Peggy was buried in a nearby cemetery, her grave a stark reminder of a life cut short. Her story could have ended there, a tragic tale of a young woman caught in the unforgiving clutches of life. But Peggy's story didn't end with her death. Rather, it was merely the beginning of a chilling tale that would echo through the streets of Highfields for years to come. In death, Peggy became more than just a memory. She became a specter, a ghostly figure haunting the very corners she once stood. She became a chilling reminder of the harsh realities of life, a specter whose story was whispered in hushed tones. In a cruel twist of fate, Peggy's life was cut short, leaving a life unlived and a story untold. But her story didn't die with her. It lived on, morphing into a chilling tale of a ghost who walked the streets of Highfields, a tale that would continue to haunt the living long after her death. The veil between life and death is thin, and for Peggy, it seemed to be non-existent. In the wake of Peggy's untimely demise, the community mourned the loss of a vibrant young woman, her life abruptly cut short by an unfortunate turn of events. She was laid to rest in a nearby cemetery, a somber reminder of the fragility of life. However, it wasn't long before whispers of strange happenings began to permeate the air. Peggy's former residence, a humble dwelling in Highfields, was the epicenter of these inexplicable occurrences. The house, once filled with life and laughter, was now a chilling echo of its former self. Those residing in the house began to report peculiar instances, occurrences that defied logical explanation. The distinct sound of a lady's footsteps, the click-clack of high heels against the cold, hard floor, was heard at peculiar hours. These sounds were eerily reminiscent of Peggy's routine, her habitual comings and goings etched into the memory of the house. The hushed whispers grew into a cacophony of terrified voices as the residents were plunged into a world of fear and uncertainty. The footsteps seemed to mirror Peggy's own, a chilling reminder of her presence that continued to linger even after her physical form had departed. The house, once a place of refuge, was now a haunting reminder of a life cut short. It seemed as if the veil between life and death had been torn asunder, allowing Peggy's spirit to roam freely in the world of the living. Her presence was palpable, a chilling echo of her former self that refused to be silenced. The residents of Highfields were left grappling with an unsettling reality. Peggy was gone, yet her spirit seemed to be trapped in a limbo between life and death. The footsteps were a haunting reminder of her presence, a spectral echo that resonated throughout the quiet nights. The line between the living and the dead began to blur, and Peggy's presence was far from gone. The streets of Highfields took on a new kind of terror as night fell. In the late 80s and early 90s, the night shadows in Highfields, a suburb of Harare, Zimbabwe, began to dance with a spectral figure, a haunting echo of a life cut short. The ghost of Peggy, once a young, vibrant woman offering her services in the dead of night, began to appear in the same places she used to frequent. The chilling apparition was reported to look just as she did in life, beautiful, young, and alluring. The men who once sought her company started to whisper among themselves, dread creeping into their voices. The tantalizing figure they once pursued was now an eerie specter, a reminder of mortality wrapped in an alluring package. The ghostly sightings were not limited to the lonely corners where Peggy used to stand, waiting for her next client. Even those living in her former residence began to experience inexplicable occurrences. The echoes of high heels clicking against the floor, the soft rustle of fabric moving, the faint scent of her perfume. These were the traces of Peggy's spectral presence. They would hear these sounds in the dead of night, the very same times Peggy used to venture out into the streets. The ghostly manifestations were uncannily reminiscent of her living routines, a spectral echo of her life. As the sightings grew more frequent, men who once lined up for Peggy's services began to avoid the areas she frequented. The fear was palpable, the air thick with trepidation. The once lively streets of Highfields became desolate after dark, the men too terrified to venture out and risk an encounter with Peggy's ghost. The most horrifying tales came from the men who claimed to have spent the night with the phantom. They reported a chillingly ordinary experience, unaware of the ghostly nature of their companion. They would find themselves in what seemed to be Peggy's home, engage in intimate activities, only to wake up in the cold light of dawn atop a grave in a nearby cemetery. Their jackets, hung on a tombstone bearing Peggy's name, served as a chilling confirmation of their ghostly encounter. The terror was not merely psychological. It was reported that many men who fell for Peggy's spectral allure went mad after the ordeal, their minds unable to cope with the terrifying reality. Some even died under mysterious circumstances, their deaths attributed to the chilling encounters with Peggy's ghost. The fear became so widespread, it was as if Highfields was under a spectral siege. The streets were deserted at night, the men too scared to venture out, and the residents living in constant fear of the haunting echoes of Peggy's life. As the ghostly sightings increased, so did the fear. Highfields was under the spell of a phantom. For those who fell for Peggy's spectral charm, a night of pleasure turned into a lifetime of torment. A chilling, bone-rattling statement that paints a haunting picture of the encounters with the ghost of Peggy. In the late 80s and 90s, the streets of Highfields, a suburb in Harare, Zimbabwe, were filled with terror and fear. The men who fell prey to Peggy's ghost were lured in by her beauty, completely oblivious to the chilling fate that awaited them. They saw her as a beautiful young woman, seemingly alive and vibrant, offering her services for the night. Their desires blinded them to the spectral reality of their companion. As the night unfolded, everything would seem perfectly normal. The men would see themselves entering a house, a place they believed to be Peggy's. The illusion was so convincing that they would engage in intimate activities with Peggy, completely unaware of the haunting truth. But the real horror would only reveal itself at dawn. Imagine the gut-wrenching terror of waking up, not in a cozy bed as expected, but on the cold, hard ground of a cemetery. The chilling realization that the house they believed they had entered was nothing more than a spectral illusion, a grave deception. Their jackets, once casually tossed aside, now hung ominously on the headstone of a grave bearing the name Peggy. The dawning reality was more horrifying than any nightmare. They had spent the night with a ghost. The mental impact of such an ordeal is unimaginable. The terror, the confusion, the utter disbelief. The men who survived this encounter were left mentally scarred, their minds forever haunted by the memory of that dreadful night. Some were driven to the brink of madness, their sanity hanging by a thread as they struggled to come to terms with their spectral encounter. Others succumbed to a fate even worse. The haunting ordeal didn't end with the light of day. The ghost of Peggy seemed to leave a lasting imprint on the men she ensnared. Many reported experiencing strange phenomena even after their encounter. Some heard the distinct sound of high heels clicking on their floors, a chilling echo of Peggy's ghostly presence. Others claimed to see her apparition in the dead of night, a spectral reminder of their horrifying ordeal. The fear of Peggy's ghost spread like wildfire through the streets of Highfields. Men began to avoid the places where she was often seen, their desire for pleasure overshadowed by the terror of encountering her spectral form. The haunting tale of Peggy's ghost served as a grim reminder of the consequences of indulging in the pleasures of the night. The men who survived Peggy's ghost were forever changed, marked by a spectral encounter that pushed them to the brink of sanity. The haunting ordeal they experienced was a chilling testament to the spectral presence that once haunted the streets of Highfields, a ghostly reminder of a life cut tragically short. As the 90s dawned, the terror that had gripped Highfields began to fade. It was as if the chilling winds of fear were calming down. The haunting figure of Peggy, once a constant specter in the lives of the men in Highfields, started to become less frequent. The once bustling nights, filled with whispers of her name and the shivers of her presence, began to quiet down. The spectral lady of the night was retreating, her haunting footsteps echoing less and less in the corridors of the houses she once frequented. Many attribute this decline to a significant event that took place in the late 90s. Peggy's family, tormented by the spectral remnants of their lost loved one, sought to bring an end to her restless wandering. They performed a ritual, a sacred rite passed down through generations, with the sole purpose of helping her spirit find peace. The ritual, steeped in tradition and mystery, was a desperate plea to the universe to allow Peggy's spirit to rest. As the incense burned and the chants filled the air, there was an eerie stillness that fell over Highfields. The once fearful whispers were replaced with hopeful silence. The ritual was a plea for forgiveness, an offering of love, a path for Peggy to leave the world of the living and find solace in the afterlife. In the days that followed, the spectral sightings lessened, the terrifying experiences of waking up in a cemetery, the eerie footsteps, the spectral figure in the night, all started to fade away. It was as if Peggy had finally found her peace. The haunting reign of the spectral lady of the night seemed to have ended, but even though Peggy's ghostly presence ceased, her story remained. It was etched into the fabric of Highfields, a chilling reminder of a life cut short and a spirit unable to rest. It became a cautionary tale, a ghost story to tell on dark nights. With the ritual's completion, Peggy's ghostly reign over Highfields ended, but her story lived on. Even in death, Peggy's impact on her community was profound. Our story takes us to Harare, Zimbabwe, in the heart of Highfields, where a young woman named Peggy once lived. She was beautiful, captivating, but her life was cut tragically short. Peggy, a lady of the night, fell pregnant and tragically died trying to terminate it. She was buried in a nearby cemetery, but her demise was just the beginning of a tale that would send chills down the spine of the community. Following her death, Peggy's spirit did not find rest. Instead, it returned to the streets she once walked, to the house she once lived in. The echoes of her life played out in eerie repetition, from the sound of high heels echoing through her former home to sightings of her spectral form on the streets late at night. Men, drawn in by her beauty, would unknowingly invite the ghost of Peggy into their lives. They would be led to what they believed was her home, engage in what they thought were normal activities, only to wake in the cold light of dawn atop a grave marked with Peggy's name. This chilling ordeal left many men mentally shattered. Some even met their untimely end. The tale of Peggy, the ghost of Highfields, became a topic of heated discussion, a cautionary tale whispered in hushed tones. It served as a stark reminder of the thin line between life and death and the potential consequences of our actions. In the late 90s, Peggy's story began to fade. It said her family performed rituals to finally lay her spirit to rest. Yet the impact of her spectral reign lingers on. Even today, the tale of Peggy is woven into the fabric of local folklore, a chilling narrative that continues to haunt the community. The legend of Peggy, the ghost of Highfields, remains a chilling reminder of a time when the veil between life and death seemed to vanish, leaving a community forever haunted.